A survivor of a huge snowstorm in Patagonia that claimed the lives of 5 people, including a 40-year-old British woman, has been describing how a volunteer rescue party was forced to use a homemade stretcher to try and help missing hikers. The incident has been described by Chilean authorities as a deeply regrettable tragedy. 40-year-old Victoria Bond from Cornwall was among 5 people killed during that storm, which caused whiteout conditions and wind speeds equivalent to a Category 3 hurricane. I spoke to one of her friends, Christian, who was hiking with Victoria.
We're relieved to be alive, of course, but devastated because we've lost one of our best friends and one of the most amazing people I've met. And we're all carrying around with us a huge amount of grief, shock and guilt. We keep replaying everything that happened that day and asking what could we have done differently. And it's overwhelming and it still doesn't feel real.
Talk to me about what happened that day, because there were concerns over the conditions. As I said, you're a well-organised group, and that national park in Chile, well used to these excursions. They have the facilities there, they have the expertise there to support groups like yourself on these hikes.
Yes, we'd already completed 3 days of hiking at that point. We had seen weather reports of winds, high winds predicted up to gusts of 100 kilometres per hour, which were like, this does not look good. We checked with all the members of staff at each individual refuge at campsite about the weather, and consistently we were told that the pass was open that day and it was safe to proceed. And this was normal conditions for Patagonia. We know that Patagonian winds are very high, and you can sometimes experience 4 seasons in a day. It does change very quickly. It wasn't until we were several kilometres into the trek on the steeper section when the weather really closed in at terrifying speed. I'm talking winds far stronger than predicted. I think it was reported up to 193 kilometres an hour, which is a Category 3 hurricane. And to add to that, which wasn't predicted, loads of snow, ice and a total whiteout. It's really difficult to describe what those conditions feel like. A lot of people said, oh yeah, we were caught in a blizzard, and you kind of think of a snowy day in a park. It was unimaginable. For one, the wind is so strong you can't move. You have to curl up into a ball and put your back towards the wind just to keep you safe from moving on the mountain. When the gusts reach that high, you can't see. It's extremely cold, and you have to keep moving. If you stop, you die.
What happened to Victoria?
So, sorry, give me a minute, it's still a bit raw.
Of course.
By the time those conditions really kicked in, we were all together, and we were closer to the refuge called Paso, which is just after the pass. So we're literally between 1 and 2 kilometres away, as opposed to 4 or 5 kilometres away from the camp that we'd come from. So we had to make a decision: is it safer just to continue on to that refuge, which we thought it would be? And descending down a mountain in those kind of conditions are much worse. So we continued up, but very close to the pass, perhaps 50 metres altitude from the pass, the weather became just impossible. We had no option but to turn around and go all the way back down to the campsite. I believe the wind must have just blown away all the top level of snow. So it's extremely slippy and hard ice, and people were just falling down the mountain. At one point, I slid all the way. Well, I slid quite far down the mountain and was just accelerating and accelerating. And I remember thinking, if I don't stop myself accelerating, I'm just going to keep on going and hit something, and that will be the end of it. So I aimed for some rocks to actually break my fall, head first, flipped over, and I think it was my backpack that saved me in that instance, because I didn't hit my head and fortunately didn't break anything. Everyone had separated, and all you could see was just a line of people walking down the mountain. And if you bear in mind, this is total whiteout conditions. It's very difficult to see in front of you and behind you. So the only thing we could do was rejoin that line and make sure that we follow the person in front of us and keep an eye on those red markers. We were all heading down together, and it was only when we got to a safer altitude, where we could breathe and see, that we could account for people and see who was there and who was missing. And we were unsure whether Victoria was behind us or in front of us. So Tom actually went back to look and waited and found a couple who said, there's no one else further up the mountain. So we continued down, running down, hoping that she'd be at the campsite. And then, of course, when we got to the campsite, we discovered she was not there and the alarm was raised straight away.
Christian, what you described sounds so frightening and disorientating. As you said, you realise Victoria's missing and you raise the alarm. What's going through your mind at that point, and what is going on around you to try and find her?
What's going through my mind is that we have to find her immediately. What's going on around me is that there didn't seem to be any urgency from the official people within the park. What we discovered was that the rangers, unfortunately, were not present the day before or there when we raised the alarm. I remember going into the office to the Vertis staff who run the campsite and saying, we've got a real emergency, someone is potentially missing on the mountain. We need to launch a rescue mission immediately. And they kind of shrugged and said, we sent a radio message to the rangers, they're on their way, but they could take hours. But what was amazing was the support of all the trekkers that day, and that some of the people who had just joined that campsite that day, who had trekked up from the previous campsite, who understood what was going on and the severity of the situation, and it led to a self-organised rescue mission comprised entirely of volunteer hikers and tourists. Was Victoria found through the official search and rescue efforts or by that volunteer group? Because what you've described to me there, I mean, the park themselves, Chile's National Forestry Corporation, has said that, you know, the deaths, Victoria wasn't the only person to die that day. The deaths are deeply regrettable, and it's ordered an internal investigation to determine any potential liabilities. You know, there are questions to be asked of everyone involved that day. But from what you're saying to me is that there were no official rangers there that day designed to help you when those kind of conditions close in, and that there wasn't a search and rescue up and running quickly enough. When did that kick in, and how was Victoria found? So there are definitely things that we hope the police investigation will look into, not to blame anyone, but just to strengthen the system for future hikers. When we arrived at Los Perros Camp, the park rangers from CONAF were not present. We were later told the previous shift had left early to return to Puerto Natales for mandatory government voting. So there was no one on site to monitor the conditions, to close the pass if it became unsafe, or to communicate directly with the hikers or the camp staff. There was a real breakdown of communication. If it wasn't for our group, we wouldn't have known that anyone was missing. Because, as you say, Victoria wasn't the only person who died on the mountain that day. There were 5 people in total. The volunteer rescue party that went up, who included 2 of our group, Tom and Matt, found 3 bodies. They recovered one of them, and she was still alive at the time, and brought her down on a homemade stretcher that the rest of us in the camp made from sleeping mats, polystyrene, and walking poles. There were fortunately medics in these volunteer groups, but unfortunately she went into hypothermic cardiac arrest. She was shot twice, and they worked on her for an hour, but she didn't make it through. The other 2 people that they found, one was already deceased on the mountain, and the other one was non-responsive, and it was unsafe to bring her down. The following day, when the rangers arrived, they recovered the remaining bodies and found the 2 further bodies, one of which was Victoria.
Well, the Chilean National Forest Corporation have said this in a statement. We have launched an internal investigation to determine any potential liability related to this accident. The investigation will include a review of all relevant information to clarify each stage of the incident, how the protocols were activated, the nature of communications, and how the search, rescue and evacuation operations unfolded. The president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, wrote on X, "To the families, friends and loved ones of the 5 individuals of Mexican, German and British nationalities who tragically lost their lives in the incident that occurred in Torres del Paine, I extend my deepest condolences. Know that you have the full support and collaboration of Chilean authorities and institutions during these difficult times."